of being, all the way back in Exodus when Moses was out there in the desert. And this is before he returned to Egypt, and he saw the burning bush, and he went up to the burning bush because he wanted to see, why is this bush burning, but yet it's still a bush? And he finds out that it's God was in the presence there, and he was told to remove his sandals because he was walking on holy ground. And Moses finally, after talking for a little while with God, he goes, who am I supposed to say is sending me back to Egypt and giving them this word, this message from you? Who am I supposed to say told me? And God says, I am that I am sent you. Now, it's a statement of being. It's the most basic statement of being. For those of you who have taken foreign language in French, if I can still remember it, it's je suis tu es RSNZ. No, that's German. Je suis tu es, I can't remember the more one now, but I know in German it's ich bin, du bist, RSNZ ist is German, and that's the conjugation of the verb to be. But the very basic understanding of to be is the verb is. It's without time. It is talking about this very moment. Well, God is am. He is the I am. He is the God who always is. For God, everything is now. There is no yesterday, there is no today, there is tomorrow, there is now with God. God can be anywhere he wants to be. Now, I realize there's some very good men. Some of you are PhDs in theology. I understand this. Forgive my simplicity and forgive the fact that I'm just taking the Bible as it's written. But God always is. C.S. Lewis mentioned this in his book, The Problem with Pain. He talks about how that we have a tendency to look back on the sins of our youth and laugh about them. And, oh, that was very fun, but that was so long ago. I was such a foolish and funny guy back then. But yet God finds the sin of years ago in our life just as painful and just as offensive as he would be if we committed the same sin and the same action now. Because, see, when Jesus Christ died on the cross, the Father was there. Now, there was a moment, in fact, there was about 3 hours, Scripture tells us, that God separated himself from his Son because Jesus Christ became our sin. But God was still there. He was there with Christ. And today, when we sin, the reason why sometimes we see the words, how we can add to the suffering of Christ through our sin, it is because of the transcendental nature of God. God is over time. And because God is over time, he is here witnessing our sin. And C.S. Lewis makes this very, very good in his book, The Problem of Pain. I would recommend that to you, but understand it is not an easy read, but it's not a very difficult read. It's a very thin book. But it's an excellent book, though I don't agree with all of Lewis's theology at all. But he does make this very cogent point. He said that God sees that sin at the cross. Because for a God that time doesn't exist, then whether the sin was created by Adam, was committed by Adam, or the sin is committed by me now, or by me in 10 years, it's all at the cross. And that is how, at the cross, all things, all sin of all time can be forgiven. And so what God is telling us now through the writing of Paul is talking about the preeminence of Christ, how Christ is over all things. And he's saying, for by him all things were created. When it says, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, the God who created, the mechanism was the second person of the Godhead who became Jesus Christ. It says, all things were created, for by him who, Christ, all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible. In other words, the things that we can see and the things that we cannot. God created the physical world. He created the elements, iron, steel, minerals, rock, water, land, dirt. He created the visible things, but he also created the invisible things, the quantum world, the subatomic world, the molecular world, the viral world. God created them. Now, the viruses that we are seeing were not part of God's original creation, but this is a result of of sin. It's a result of sin breaking down. Science wants to refer to this as entropy, about how everything moves from order to disorder. We believe that's because of sin. And so he created all of these things. And then it says, and then Paul continues, he says, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. Here he's also talking about the spiritual world. God created the angels. God created those angels that became demons. Everything exists by God's hand. And then he continued, he goes, all things were created through him, and get this, and for him. Everything was created for Jesus Christ. Why? Because he is the ruler of all the ages. When Jesus Christ comes back, and I believe what we're seeing in this world means that we are very, very close to the time that Jesus will come back. I do not know the time. No, I'm not going to give you a date because I don't know the date. The Bible's very clear. If somebody tries to tell you a date, they need help. But if they try to tell you these things, it's not because that they know, it's because that they're guessing. But when he comes back as Lord of Lords and King of Kings, it's not because he will become Lord of Lords and King of Kings. It's because he is. And so, but then he says that he finishes out in verse 17, and he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. Science says that there's more spaces in the walls than there is solid. Then how in the world does the solid hold together? It's because Jesus Christ exists. We live because he lives. And I'm not just talking spiritually. It is true spiritually that we live as Christians because Jesus Christ lives. But this world exists. This time frame, this temporal plane, this universe, all that there is, it exists. It holds together. It functions because Jesus Christ is, because he lives. Now, this world right now is underneath the power. We talked about that earlier in the week. It's underneath the power of Satan. He's the management. Doing a really bad job, by the way. But Jesus Christ is, and everything is made by him, it's made through him, it's made for him. Don't you think that we should expend more energy to find out what the one that created all of this, the one who all of this was made for, don't you think it would be worth an effort to figure out what he wants? Blessings.